I'm very honored to be here, especially since this is like a multicultural, multilingual conference, which is sometimes rare to see. So thank you very much, and well, bear with me and the English. In case I speak too fast, feel free to stop me and let me know to like tone it down. That's all right. All right. So I heard before, I tuned in before that you've already heard about employer branding. As I understand, the mix of you is like HR related people and then employer branding. I wanted to talk to you about something that is very often on my mind, being an employer brand business partner, being in this field for a few years now. And the one thing that whatever project I'm working on, whichever company it is, when I speak to other professionals, it's always a question of, do I do it myself? Is it a DIY project? Do I need to, hone all the million skills that come within branding? Or do I try to delegate? Do I try to collaborate with other departments? Do I try to collaborate more with the leadership, with agencies, maybe, like depending on what's needed for the project? And there's always a thin line of how to actually come with that. A sub question with that is then always, where does employer branding stand? Where does it sit? Is it within marketing? Is it within HR? Is it a whole separate department? What I've come to conclude is that it can be all of them or neither of them. It very much depends on the industry you're in, the maturity of your company, what the strategy of the company is. And based on that, employer branding can look very different. Your employer branding can be very different to what I'm used to. And I think it also, in the end, comes down to what kind of person you are. What is your personal brand? So I wanted to start off with introducing myself. This is my brand. I am very quirky. I'm a very happy person. I play with the borderline of professional and personal. So you can see that none of these pictures are very professional. I, for the life of me, couldn't find a good, decent, professional photo of myself to introduce myself to you. So this is basically me and my brand. I am originally from Croatia, lived there, studied there. But very soon, at the age of 15, 16, I all of a sudden moved to Brazil, which is the bottom middle picture. Where I went to live to Brazil for a year. I studied there. I did more of a culture exchange. And this, I think, kind of started the very kind of ride or die mentality in me. As of then, I loved testing out new things, as I call it. I love to throw myself into the deep end and see if I make it. If I make it, that's great. If I don't, take a few steps back and let's revert. Because the decision to move to, so far away was literally within less than 24 hours. I remember, coming home from school to my mom, hey, there's this exchange. I want to go to Germany because I spoke German. So Germany was close. It was a very nice, safe, yet different experience. Come to think of it, the next day they told me, oh, we actually want you to go to Brazil. And we were all, well, that's new. But I went. We did it. My family survived. I survived. Nobody forgave them or understood why they let me go so far. But I think that was, for me personally, the moment where everything went haywire. Soon after that, I knew that I wanted to do more exchanges. I wanted to do more experiences abroad. I wanted to learn more languages. So that's how now I ended up in the Netherlands. So I'm actually tuning in from Amsterdam, where I'm living for about 4 years. Love living here. The weather is not as good as in Croatia, but everything else, the people are very lovely. I'm again learning a new language, so that's great. And then some other things about me, as I'm quite open-minded, I also love presenting. I love being on stage. I love sharing my passion. I love sharing things that I care about. So on the top left picture, you can see in one of the companies I worked for, we did conferences. So they asked me actually to be the presenter there. And that was also great because it was the first time that I was presenting in front of a camera, being filmed rather than just on stage and doing what it is, for the 5 minutes of fame and then, go home, nobody remembers. But that's what I used to do as well. I used to be an entertainer in hotels for children parties and stuff like that. So I really love lifting the energy and motivating people to be either their best selves or just have fun. In the bottom right picture, you can see another moment in my life where I decided to throw myself in the deep end. I never owned a pet. Well, I owned like hamsters, but like I never owned a dog, but I really wanted to. So what I decided to do instead is to pet sit. So this is just like one out of a million dogs that are walking around the house every day. Where, yeah, I'm trying to make myself be more with animals because ultimately that's what I want to do. So every now and then I try to challenge myself, which kind of ties into employer branding, or if you're in HR, every day we set ourselves a challenge, right? Whether it be a challenge for the employees, whether it be a personal challenge for us, whether it be, oh, I really want to submit this creative project that I have no idea if it's going to work or not. So this is my brand. And that's how I address employer branding as well. When we now tune back a little bit into an employee life cycle, because ultimately what employer brand does, as all of you know, I'm preaching here to the choir, but is we take care of the employees, whether it's the ones that are in the attraction stage, or the ones that are not yet with us, that maybe don't know about us, but you want to reach them. They are also part of your funnel, whether they be in the recruitment process, whether they already maybe signed the contract, you're trying to onboarding and trying to make their onboarding successful, set them up for success so they can do their best work. And then you do all the things in their employee actual cycle when they're with the company, all the way to the onboarding. I obviously took this image from Personio. That's an HR tool. Maybe some of you know it, but it's really a simple way to simply portray the vast and the hugeness of employer branding, in what ways it can actually touch upon each of the employees and yeah, each of us that are taking care of the employees as well. So why is this important? Because there are so many skills and so many different departments that own this. So this comes into a question where, how do you understand employer branding? Does employer branding own all of these stages? Does employer branding own attraction? Does it own recruitment? No, it doesn't. So most of the time we are collaborating with other departments, which makes collaboration, working in teams, delegation, the core skill that we can have in this job. So as we can see here, that every single stage has its own, let's say, own department that is mostly taking care of it, at least. And we are supporting them. We are supporting them to make sure that all of these stages across the entire employee life cycle are tied in together. So yes, analytics are super important. Yes, HR processes are super important. But I think where the actual value comes from employer branding is connecting all of these dots. Rarely you will be the sole owner of any of these processes. You might be there to set it up. So you might be there to own it at the beginning. But at one point you need to delegate, because you need to have the bigger picture for the entire company, for the entire brand of the company to, you know, speak the same language, to sing from the same tunes. So this is where the love of employer branding comes in. Depending on each of the stage, you need different stakeholders. You need different skills. And also, depending on the company, these stages might not be as important to you as they are to me. So this is where we come in. Are we an individual department that's then going to take care of all of this? Is our individual department going to take care only on part of this? And these are the questions that you, as an employer branding specialist, or if employer branding is simply part of your job, you don't need to be the only person doing it. You need to think about that. How does this correlate to the business strategy that we currently have? Depending on how many people you have in your team, is it only you? That's a one-person band, which oftentimes it is, or you are lucky enough to have a team of employer branders or different skill sets within the branding team. Then you can take care of many more things. But if you're one person, you do need to pick your battles. And depending on the company strategy, you might focus more on one part than the other. And that's okay. Depending on what the stage you're in, depending on the industry you are, depending on the talent you're actually trying to attract, you might have very different projects than a different company. So tying it all together, you as an employer branding professional need to be a jack of all trades, a master of none, which is still better than a master of only one. But we need to be marketeers. We need to be copywriters. We need to be presenters. We need to be culture ambassadors. We need to be event planners. We need to be strategists. We need to speak with the leadership. We need to be full on in analytics and numbers to make sure our points get across so we can work on future projects. So all of these skills tend to be quite different. And you may know a little bit about everything, but it's hard to be really good, a master in all of these things. So what it comes down to is picking the ones you're really good at. Or what I really love about this is that I can pick the ones I love or the ones I really want to challenge myself in. And that can be one or two skills. The rest, I need to decide what I'm doing depending on the project. Because some of the projects can be just about fixing. It can be, I just arrived into the company. They have all of these processes. Let's take an easy example that usually is the first thing that an employer branding person does, which is take a look at the communication in the recruitment stage. They look at the recruiter's emails. They look at the system, how it's done. They look at all the notifications, whatnot, and they basically become a copywriter. So every single message that goes out to the candidates, you take a look. This is kind of fixing. You're not building anything new, because most of the time, if you got hired, they probably had some sort of templates or things. But on the other hand, you may come into a company that's a startup and has no processes, nothing. So you need to build things from scratch, where you need to really assess what are the skill sets that you already have in the company? Who can I leverage to help me with this? And mind you that a lot of times you're going to hear a no, because what people usually think, oh, but you're employer branding. You should do all that, but you obviously cannot. So what is the core skill set that we have here? We need to be storytellers. We need to be able to ignite that fire in other people to show them why this is important for them. So what is it that you can tell them why they should help you? Why is it in their interest to make sure that everything they do is according to your brand, that we are all singing from the same tunes, that we are all telling the same story? So here is also another core value that we need to have, which is not do it ourselves, not do it individually as a department, but enabling others to do that. You need to be able to preach to your choir, make sure that they want to do it, make sure that these values that you're trying to portray, this tone of voice that you're trying to portray, whatever it is that you're trying to align across the board, that they do it themselves, that when they are thinking about their projects, they think, oh, this is not really how our company voice should sound like, so I better change it to this, whatever it is. So we, at the end of the day, are enablers more than doers. And that, I think, is the core difference between what employer branding is perceived at and what our actual goal is. So just to conclude, I'm trying to also make this quite short considering we're already over time. We need to ignite the fire in your stakeholders, ignite the fire in your leaders to make sure they see the value you bring, the story you're trying to tie up all together to make their brand go. If you have trouble sometimes explaining what employer branding does, more often than not, they are influencing a lot, or they are investing a lot in marketing brand for their product, for their company as a seller of their products or services. So just say what branding is for your marketing, this branding is for your employees. It's what will keep you afloat through all of your projects. So make sure that you ignite that fire in your immediate stakeholders, in other departments, so that you can all tie together to the same story. Make sure to not forget data. Let's all be more like Barbara that was presenting earlier. Data is our friend, which is very challenging in our line of job. Employer branding is more often than not about sentiment. So the ROI is quite hard to showcase. Again, tuning into back about the vast majority, or like the big number of steps that we can influence depending on which stage you're actually working on. Some are harder than others to actually tie numbers to, but try still. Try to work with the KPIs of the department you're actually collaborating with. Try to focus on, okay, these are your KPIs. How can I help you with those KPIs by making sure you're also on brand, but you're also reaching your goals? Try to see what's in it for them so that both of you can be successful. And the last thing, which I've mentioned a couple of times now, try to tie it in to a bigger story. Try to find out what is the story that's important to the person you're talking to. Are you talking to the marketing department that has designers that you really need? Because a lot of times now design is everything, but they're obviously over the moon with workload. So how are you going to make sure that their story aligns with yours, that they really want to help you because it's in their interest for the brand to stay intact? If you're talking to the leadership, make sure that they understand the volumes of hire, the quality of hire, the NPS scores from your employee surveys. How are you going to elevate all of that through your efforts? And the last thing I'm going to leave you with is a quote from James Ellis. Highly recommend his book if you haven't read it. It's actually, he put it free online, which is that a job of employer branding is not to change the brand. When we enter a company, we're not there to change their employer brand. A brand exists, whether they are doing anything about it or not. So your job is to try and influence it. Try to have everyone sing the same tune. Try to influence all the people on the teams whose work impacts your brand that you're trying to elevate. Thank you very much. I hope it was insightful. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Lana. Întrebări? Okay.
I was so clear. I love this.
Nu știu dacă sunt în My Connector. Imediat.
Okay, so one question from our online attendees. Does employer branding end at separation, or does it continue with our ex-employees? Do we have any tools to measure how our ex-employees think or talk about us?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's also sometimes a controversy amongst employer branders. So I believe that an employer branding is really a loop. It never ends. It starts way before our company and it ends way after our company. I think to properly answer that question, a great example that I heard is from EY, so one of the big four. So what they do, they have enormous efforts into their alumni club. So whenever someone leaves, they enter an alumni club and they have, I don't know, events or whatnot to keep them engaged. And that way, they actually have boomerang employees coming back to the company that at high rates, which I haven't heard any other company have. So really, employer branding doesn't stop with offboarding. It never ends. So you always need to, maybe a caveat there. For the good employees that you want to keep, you want to keep them engaged throughout. Is it an alumni club? Is it just every now and then some sort of event? Is it try and have, I don't know, a newsletter that's specifically for employees type of thing? Whatever it is, you always want to end your partnership on a good note so that you open doors for later on if they want to come back.
Do you have any examples of what not to do?
Plenty. I think one of the biggest mistakes that I've also done is that you think that you're alone in this, is the fact that you think that you're the only person that needs to take care of the brand. So as I said, a lot of times employer branding is a one-person band, which is fine. But then the skill, as I said, that you really need to hone is delegating and working with others rather than trying to do it all yourself, which is often a trap that we fall under. You can't be a great marketeer. You can't be a videographer. You can't be an editor. You can't be a copywriter. You can't be whatever not all in one person and doing it professionally and doing it perfectly and doing it day in and day out and tying it all together. It's just not humanly possible. You can't be the one delegating all of that and looking at the overall picture, but you need to make sure that all of these things are happening at the same time. So yeah, I hope that's one of many, obviously.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Lana.
Thank you, guys.